guys? Welcome back to another episode of Back on the Bump. I believe we are on episode 6, so we've kind of stuck with this at least for a little bit of the process so far, and we're starting to make some progress. So for those of you guys that have been following along, obviously you know that I'm rehabbing Tommy John surgery. I had surgery around mid-March, so we're a few months into the process now, but for those of you guys that are just joining us, I've kind of been documenting this entire journey, kind of what I'm going through, my rehab process, kind of the stuff I've been doing, and then kind of a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff of what it looks like to be rehabbing as a Major League Baseball player and rehabbing at home especially. So for those of you guys that don't know, I've been fortunate to be able to stay in Denver this entire time. Obviously, me living here in the off season and then me growing up here, I have a lot of ties in Denver. My house is in Denver, so it was really, really nice of them to let me stay, and I was lucky that I was able to stay in Denver for my rehab process. A lot of teams will usually send their players to the spring training complex, so for us that's Arizona, but in Scottsdale, which it's a very nice facility, but Arizona in the summer is definitely not the most fun thing in the world. So it was great that I was able to stay here and stay back with the wife and the pups. But so far, you guys have seen we haven't done a whole lot in terms of the rehab stuff, but this week actually we got into some more in-depth stuff on the lifting side as well as the physical therapy side. So we're going to start off with the physical therapy stuff. The first thing with the physical therapy is we're starting to prep the body for throwing. So aside from the normal shoulder exercises and forearm stuff, we're starting to prepare the elbow to handle loads. So what I really mean by that is getting it used to kind of dynamic athletic movements. So we're doing rebounder throws off the trampoline, which is basically me chest passing the ball off the trampoline. We're doing a lot more catching stuff. We've got some stuff with the medicine balls, throws back into the wall, some rotational stuff. So really getting the whole body primed and ready to go once we do start throwing here in about a month. So that stuff's all been super entertaining. It's actually pretty refreshing to see how productive my right side has been. I think it's always funny to see people do stuff with their opposite hand, but I've been fortunate. There's been a few off seasons where I've been messing with the high school kids, and I've done a lot of our drill work right-handed, either to A, kind of demonstrate a drill, or B, just to compete with the high school kids and have a good time with it. So I'm definitely noticing that my right arm and my dexterity through the right side is pretty solid right now. I'm able to do a lot of the med ball stuff way more efficiently with my right side right now, which is partially expected obviously after the surgery, but at the same time I've been kind of impressed by how efficient I actually move that way. So maybe I'll start throwing with both hands someday, we'll see, but probably not. On the strength and conditioning side, it's been a lot of the same in the sense of the sleds and the lower body stuff and how much load we're putting on the lower body, but what has started to change is we're going to more of a in-season rep scale, simply due to the fact that we're doing more and more stuff on the field. So for me, I've started to run on the field, which is a big thing. I think we're running about 4 or 5 days a week right now, which, as crazy as it sounds, it's refreshing, because when you don't run for that long and when you don't play for that long, you start to miss the little things. So just being able to run and stuff has been nice, but with that comes all the stress of running, all the different workload of running and being outside and all that kind of stuff. So we've kind of pushed a lot of the strength and conditioning stuff to more of an in-season scale. So I have a lot of you guys on TikTok especially asking me what I do for lower body, what kind of lifts, what kind of reps, all that kind of stuff, and that's where we'll get a little bit more into the sport specific stuff, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But right now the in-season type load is somewhere around 5 sets of 4, 5 sets of 5, whatever, 4 sets of 6. Just stuff where I'm able to push decent weights, but also I'm able to do enough reps to where it's not just like bodybuilding, bulking kind of stuff. Maybe like some of the stuff I do in the off season. It's not really power development, it's more strength maintenance, because for us right now especially, there's no reason. We did a good job really pushing that power base and pushing that strength base with all the load early in the rehab process. So now you're seeing me do a lot more dynamic movements, and I'll show some of them here. But with these dynamic movements, you're seeing me kind of focus on the movement pattern itself. For me, the strength isn't really the issue, but the functional strength becomes the issue a lot of times. So I'm really working on driving my knees over my toes. I'm really working on staying stable on my legs so that it's a smooth and consistent movement. With these exercises, you're going to see me really going slow and trying to be focused. That's one of the challenges with a lot of these exercises, especially, is Their weight isn't crazy, so it's not like I'm really having to focus and push the weight and absolutely grind through the reps. It's more of a mental grind to try and make sure you are being fluid and you are being focused on your movement and be staying present in your movement. Because a lot of times with the lighter weights and kind of the trickier movements, it's easy to just let your head wander and kind of skip through the reps. But for these, I'm really trying to focus on what muscles are activating when and how I'm pushing through the movement, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to help me on the mound. So going along with that, the sport-specific training, the position-specific training, even the individualized training as a whole. For a lot of you guys, you're getting a strength base, especially high school kids, you're getting a strength base, and that's great, and you have to absolutely do that. But where you're starting to lack, if you ask me, is once you get that strength base, there's the next step. And that next step is learning your body and learning how to adapt and teach your body to do things efficiently and effectively. So for some guys, every guy's a little bit different. Some guys are kind of quick twitch, right? Some guys are powerful, strong guys. Some guys are just have a lot of endurance. They're springy, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of those guys out there. And then in baseball specifically, you see some guys that maybe don't have the muscular strength, if you will, but they move really well. They're kind of whippy, long limbs, flexible joints, all that stuff. So part of being a good player and part of a good program is learning what you're good at, what you're not so good at, and then where to improve on your weaknesses and where to continue to improve on your strengths. So one of the biggest things for me is not neglecting those strengths by any means. The reason I'm able to throw as hard as I do sometimes is because of my strength base. I'm not somebody that's ever going to be tall and lanky and limber and just I'm going to be using my levers to create leverage and velo. That's just not going to happen. I'm not tall enough. I don't have long enough limbs. So for me, all of my velocity, all of my stuff is going to come from just straight power production. So my lower half specifically is going to generate a lot of force. It's going to generate a lot of momentum. And then my upper half is my biggest asset, and that's what's going to allow me to finish. That's what's going to allow me to maybe not be perfect with my lower half, but I'm strong enough to kind of push through some of those things with my upper half and still get to pretty solid positions. So with the lifting stuff, for me specifically, my program is very catered to what we call load and drive. I get them all confused in my head sometimes because it kind of switches back and forth, but right now it's got a load and drive. So with this load and drive specifically, those two things are obviously very important functional movements, especially in the pitching motion. So load, I like to just equivalent to raw strength, and it's not necessarily that I'm not strong, it's that I don't get myself into strong positions, and that's part of the reason that registers low. And then the other one is drive, and so drive is kind of your transfer of energy, in my opinion. And in pitching specifically, the transfer of energy is huge. It doesn't matter how much energy you create, it doesn't matter how quick your arm moves. If you can't efficiently transfer energy up the chain, you're going to be in trouble. So that's where I've really focused, and you'll see some of these movements like these split squats, even these single leg squats. The idea here is to try and teach the body to move through a full range and transfer that force all the way from the toes up through the trunk and into the complete movement, right? So with these exercises, this is one of the things when I get these questions is I don't want to say, oh, you should do squats and you should do deadlifts and you should do this. For some of you guys, that basic strength training is going to be great, and that's the first step, and that's where you have to start kind of your foundation. But for a lot of you guys, realistically, if you've gotten that foundation, it's time to move on to that next step, and that's where we really get into that functional individualized training. So if you're not at a place that does something like that, I would encourage you to find somewhere or reach out to me and see if you can find something, because that's the big key, is finding something that works for you and not just doing a real cookie cutter exercise. So along with that, it goes into mechanics. So we talked about mechanics a little bit last week. We talked about my mechanics specifically. We talked about things that I was working on, and this is where you can kind of bridge the gap. So I'll show kind of some of the things I'm working on in the weight room right here, as well as on the mound. And so maybe you guys can kind of tell how it does truly transfer, and the weight room a lot of times is what's going to allow us to make those adjustments quickly. So here you see a pretty simple movement. It's a side lunge with a slide board. Obviously taking that front leg out, keeping all the weight on that one leg. Now we're going to see me on the mound. Kind of same position, right? I'm keeping my weight in my back leg. Now that's a pretty simple concept, obviously. Weights in one leg. Everybody's done that before. You're balancing on one leg, life's good, all that. But What we're working on here is I'm trying to create good muscle memory and create good patterns with my lower half, so that when I do transfer this to the mound and you see me try and stay in my glute, try and stay in that back leg a long time, I'm keeping myself in a powerful position. So I'm keeping that hip kind of coiled, I'm keeping all that strength loaded up in the glute, so when I'm on the mound, I'm able to hold that knee back in torsion, I'm able to keep my weight back as long as possible, and then when it's time to fire my hips, I have all that power kind of wound up or stored up to push into my hips. So that's one of the big things. And for those of you guys that are, you know, big on lifting, I'm preaching to the choir here. You've seen a lot of this stuff, and it's not rocket science, but at the same time, for you guys that are just kind of getting into that stage where you're trying to push to the next level, that's what you're going to start noticing is some of the limitations of your mechanics are simply going to be tied to strength, mobility, endurance, whatever it is, because you're going to see the weight room and your strength and mobility is really what's limiting you and what you're able to do. I see a lot of times working with guys all the way from youth to even some professional guys, you see there's some strength or mobility deficiencies, and that ends up truly affecting the mechanics because your body's not going to do something that it's incapable of doing. Maybe it tries, but that's how you end up getting hurt. So a lot of times the body's going to protect itself, and it's not going to let you do something that you're not capable of. So that all goes back to this idea of individualized training, individualized programs. I know we're trying to roll something out at my facility for more individualized throwing program and mechanics work, because for a lot of you guys, some drills aren't really going to serve any purpose, and some drills may make the world of difference. So that's kind of where, if you can find something or somebody, there's a lot of people out there that do a good job, but that knows who you are and what you need to work on. That part of it's huge, because there's no sense wasting your time doing overly generic exercises over and over and over, because you're just not going to see the same gains as if you get that base and then you start to develop individually for something that you personally need to do. Continuing on with this, obviously the strength stuff's huge. Obviously I'm pretty passionate about it. I'm somebody that, you know, if I wouldn't have worked hard and I wouldn't have pushed that side of it, I would have never made it this far in baseball. There's some guys that are obviously freakishly talented, and not to say that I'm not talented, and I've been given a lot of gifts by all means, but I definitely had to work on the strength and conditioning and mechanics side to get to the point I am right now. So I really urge you guys to take that seriously and really make sure you're conscious of what's limiting you and how to push through that. All in all with this stuff, I would encourage you guys to keep working, keep learning. There's a lot of great assets out there. There's a lot of great teachers out there that want to help you guys, and for me specifically, I think there's a lot of people that have your best interests at heart, and you'll be able to tell who that is. But from my standpoint right now, obviously going through this rehab process, it's given me a lot of time to reflect and see where I'm at and the things I need to work on, and maybe how I'm going to go about that. So I'm going to try and continue to pass a lot of that along to you guys. I'm going to show some videos here at the end of the video of kind of some of the rehab arm care stuff I've been doing that you guys might find useful. But I'm going to continue to keep pushing these out, and I appreciate you guys sticking around. Be looking forward to more content. There's going to be a lot more prehab rehab stuff coming in here soon, because we're getting closer and closer to throwing, so you're going to see more of what my actual routine is going to look like. It's going to get close to what I actually do during a normal season, so I'm going to try and keep sharing that with you guys so you have it. But thank you guys again for watching, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you in the next one.
Love, X, no O. I was feeling rich, but we turned out broke.